All right, guys, I'll get you guys rolling here. Get this set up. So, what the topic we're gonna hit on, and I talked a little bit about this, and I shared over a interview with Tony Robbins and Hormozy, which I recommend you guys you have like Saturday morning or something or afternoon when there's nothing on TV, kick that on. It's about an hour, but it's great, man. There's some good nuggets in there. So. It, I mean, obviously, especially for you entrepreneurs or I know most of you guys are leading individuals, so obviously, it correlates with that as well. But what I'm going to talk about and what he talked about, and I think it was Tony Robbins and uh, Sanchez. What's her first name? It's not Nicole, but anyway, she's an entrepreneur as well. She is in the same lines of uh, knows Hermosi really well, but she Cody Sanchez, and she goes in and buys small businesses and revamps them and keeps them under her portfolio. But there's an interview with her as well. I probably should share that. But anyway, it talks about controlling your state. So we're going to touch on that and some of the loops and things of that nature that you may have experienced and or um, you know you may not be aware of. So with that said, we're going to get you guys rolling. So controlling your state and breaking a loop. So again, this is some NLP components of self-mastery under pressure. And this is going to be key because a lot of times we create the stress or response or the pressure ourselves. So it's not necessarily it's just again it's how you uh, control your response to situations in the state you're in. Now, I will say, obviously, there's situations where uh, your body is designed to fight or flight, so survival, and it's okay to use that when you need to, but very seldom do we have to do that. Hopefully not. So learning to respond instead of react. I've touched on this in some formats later last year as well, but it came back in front of me again. So I thought it was a topic that would be good, for everybody uh, to revisit and kind of self-evaluate. So becoming a calm, decisive leader in all situations. So control is key, and if you can control your state, you have a lot more control. So here's the objective I want you to go through: understanding how emotional and mental loops are formed. So we're going to talk about and recognize how loops can hijack behavior under stress and or just in general. Uh, Install tools to regain control in real time. And so we'll go through some scenarios. Why state control is everything. Your results are driven by the state you live in most often. I've talked to and coached individuals who I would say they run pretty hot. So it becomes a mechanism that they're used to. So when things are calm, they create problems. And I would say I've probably been in those situations before when I had a business to a certain point. Um, I was always looking to tinker with the operations to make it better, but maybe I shouldn't have. I was looking for other things to do or break things. So you just got to be more self-aware, and self-awareness is important. State's going to determine your focus, meaning, and available actions, whether that's towards your spouse, your children, your coworkers, uh, and how you show up as a leader. Obviously, in other situations as well, across the board. So, some circumstances, different states, completely different outcomes. Our same circumstances, excuse me. Um, if you have, if you're in a different state and you can take two different individuals and put them in the situation, the one that controls the state may and typically is going to have a totally different outcome in comparison to the person who didn't control their state. I would say you see this, and again, I shared another podcast over. You guys have to listen to, in it's more self development components, but they talk a lot about being under pressure and what is pressure. and then controlling your state in those situations. And that's when you would look at high level athletes and look at what they have to do to perform and how they consistently practice control of their state. And that's why, and that's one of the reasons why they're so good is controlling their state under situations where most people would not have the ability to control their state, but it's a practiced skill set. Because again, if you can control your state, you're going to be able to perform. You have total control. You're going to perform better. So again, you don't need to rise your goals. You fall to the level of emotional regulation. So if there is a big discrepancy of how you're operating and how you're showing up as far as your emotional responses, it it's going to be showing up in other areas. It's going to be a little bit more challenging for you to get from point A to point B because pressure will expose your default state. It's happened to me. I've obviously had to learn a lot of tough lessons over my life. And, one of my mechanisms used to be, go straight to anger because it was survival mode and it didn't serve me well in many situations. Uh, and I did a lot of work in the NLP component to pull those anger responses out. Does it still um, come about sometimes? Then I have to do some reflection and do a self-evaluation. What's the purpose? And dig down. What's the purpose of me getting angry and or not controlling my state? So, it's a ongoing process. Without regulation, environment controls behavior and or whoever else that caused you to be out of your state may have the upper hand. So what is a loop? It's a thought triggers emotional response and or something that you were exposed to that you believe is true. Then it made it happen to you, or you were exposed to it, or you've seen it, felt it, heard it, something in that format that you've taken on that you utilize as a tool, but a tool that may not serve you. So emotion's going to drive behaviors. Behaviors create outcomes. Outcomes reinforce identity, the stories. So we can change all that. So here's some just general. This happens in a multitude of ways. So stressful work day, mental overload, thought. I'm behind, emotional, anxiety, and tension. We create it. Many times, anxiety is created. You know, uh, when our coach, we were sitting in a room full of really high level entrepreneurs, business owners, and managers, leaders, and I forget how he actually framed it, and I'm not going to do it justice, but he was telling a story because it's language, right? And he talked about a person that came up to him, and or he just framed it in a format that a person's like, I suffer from anxiety. I'm always XYZ, right? I'm always anxious. And he's like, when did you decide to be anxious? And why would you, how do you frame it? That really sucks for you. You're choosing to be anxious. Again, I'm not doing it justice because I forget the whole story. And it was like, bam, it was like a slap in the face and like, ooh, a person who has taken that identity on has two ways to respond to that self-reflection and going, oh shit, maybe I am taking that on. Maybe I am creating anxiety, or they'll get defensive and own it, right? And say, and fight for that anxiety. That's just an example. Again, behavior, avoidance, distraction, outcome, guilt and frustration, identity. I always fall off when life gets busy, when things are not perfect, when when it's stressful. So that's an example of a loop. Okay. Just be careful with your language. Loops are not personality traits. They're conditioned nervous system patterns and typically have an emotional response and or some type of program associated with emotional response. Uh, and patterns can be interrupted by and be retrained. Pattern interruption is actually a technique from NLP. And why do some people who operate at a high level still struggle? This is not a discipline problem. This is not a motivational problem. This is a state access problem under pressure, and or it may be programs that are running in the background that you need to work through. So what happens under pressure? Nervous system shifts into a threat mode, fight or flight, and that's typically we create that. So brain is going to prioritize safety over growth, and or it is going to recall a time when you felt safe, and or that program will, and it's going to revert back to what you did. If you didn't learn the lesson from it, extract it, and why you have an emotional response to it. So old survival strategies automatically activate. What's your defense mechanism? What have you thought to be true that may not be true that you consistently go back to? So again, that's self-reflection and doing the deeper work. So three levels of state control. Physiology leads the mind. So focus directs attention. What you focus on typically it will come to fruition. So if you focus on the negative, it's going to be negative all the time. You focus on the bad, it's going to be bad all the time. You know, so meaning creates emotional response. So the physiology component, they've done a lot more research and understanding of the central nervous system and the physiology and how it impacts everything, really. So breathing patterns influence the nervous system. Posture changes confidence and energy. Movement and cold exposure rapidly shift state. So there's ways to manipulate your physiology to get a response. And just like riding a bike, if you practice certain components, you get better at it, and you get more in tune with your central nervous system and the response patterns you have. So it's like a secret weapon. Level two is focus. Stress narrows focus to what is wrong. Okay. Survival basis exaggerates threats. Central nervous system or the fight or flight kicks in. Parasympathetic, sympathetic. You get that, adrenaline rush and all those feelings and yada, yada, yada. We'll watch it. You got to go to the bathroom, right? Um, so intentional questions redirect attention. So you got to really, what's the purpose of me having this stress or having this stress response or this emotional response. So you got to do some reflection and digging. So the meaning, events themselves are neutral. We create the response to them. So meaning determines emotional reaction, and you may associate that emotion to positive or negative, or a time frame or time in your life, and you always go back to that. Again, these are programs. Chosen meaning creates power or paralysis. So you have the ability to respond. You know, you can have the power over it, or it can derail you or push you back into the patterns that are not serving. So breaking the loop, you can name it if you like. You can create awareness and separation. Maybe a spot, maybe a time. So there's different ways to identify those patterns or loops and disassociate with them and or um, uh, move them on. You cannot change what you are unconsciously inside of. Okay. Now, because your unconscious mind is running those programs, but you do have to do some work to identify the programs, and you can use your conscious and unconscious mind to remove those programs. So interrupt the physiology first. So that's a pattern interrupt, and you can do it a lot of different ways. Cool part is I've talked about this. It's been a while. If you're, and you can do this all across the board with anybody, just about. Adults are a little bit more savvy with it, but not always. If you want to do a pattern interrupt, so if somebody's state is out of control, Say your child's acting a way that children do, especially one of them more than the other, is unresponsive, uncomprehendable in her state, just crazy state, crying, whatever it may be. A pattern interrupt, a good one is, you smell that? Who farted? That may break her state. It should break her state, or somebody's knocking at the front door. There's just different ways to break an individual state. You see it over there? It'll break your state. That's just pattern interrupt. You can also do it with slow nasal breathing yourself. Control my state, awareness. Okay, posture reset. Short, intense movements. Cold water on face to reset nervous system. That does work as well. But you would maybe have to step out of your environment to do that. But I'm talking about tools that you can do right away. Is the breathing and or pattern interrupt. You may have to use that on somebody else because you can't do the pattern interrupt is more of a tool to do on other people. Your breathing, nasal component, cold exposure, removing yourself from the environment are the other ones to break those loops and or pattern interrupt. So that way you can actually evaluate and understand what's going on. Shift focus with better questions. Why am I doing this? What's the outcome? Is it truly a stressor? Why am I responding this way? Is there something deeper? Do I always do this? Is it something I need to change? Um, so there's just that's the evaluation component. What is one thing I can control right now that maybe would change everything or move the needle in the right direction? And what is a small decisive action? Sometimes it's okay to agree upon a disagreement. I agree with you, but we don't have to see eye to eye. That's part of the problem with our society today. It's got to be one way or another. Not really. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bad programming running around the television, running around the internet that's manipulating our society in a negative frame of mind. There's a lot of stuff going on that's untrue, and that's what television programming does. They do it in all formats, from radio to television to songs. Listen to some of the songs; they're awful, especially the language they use. I'm just giving you guys an example. I'm getting off track. So, breaking loop step 4: take identity aligned with actions under stress. Who do you show? How do you show up when it's stressful? Who's the new version of you? Action is the vote for the new identity, or it's your choice. Reps under pressure builds self trust. You do it more often, just like shooting that free throw and everybody's watching, and there's no time on the clock, and you're down by 2 points. Pressure. Put yourself in those situations, control your state, and you get better at it. You can install new default states. You can pin it with certain areas. So you you know if you want to have a feel good, or if you want to control your state, or you're always going to be happy and or go to a happy place, you can squeeze your earlobe. You can grab your finger. You can associate the state you choose with and put it in a certain location. But when you do that, you want to think of a time when you felt really good, or was really confident, or was in a really calm state, and you go back to that time, and, all the feelings, what was around, take in all the components that are associated with that, and then place it in an area that you're familiar with, and you place it in that area. Now, every time you come back to that area, that feeling will come back. So maybe it's feeling of confidence, maybe it's feeling of calm. You can play around with that. The goal is a faster recovery, shorter loops, and quicker return to center. And then understanding, if you're looping or not. Loop is just a program on repeat. You find yourself in the same pattern. You know, it's like Groundhog's Day. Daily anchors that stabilize state, consistent morning routines set the tone, non-negotiable movements for training. This is more associated with, obviously some of the program. Food structure that stabilizes energy, evening shutdowns, rituals, improves recovery. Maybe you do breath work, start working on that, get yourself out of your regular state. Um, there's so much stuff coming out, and I'm dabbling. I like to, get off the beaten path and out of reality sometimes, because there's a lot of stuff pointing towards, controlling your outcome. If you can put yourself in an altered state and do some work inside with the unconscious mind, it helps move the needle forward for you in a multitude of ways. But you have to be very clear on where you want to go. But that's another thing is altered state. And when somebody says altered state, like, oh, what is an altered state? Well, you can sit there and start watching a movie and go into an altered state and not even know it, and you're hypnotized. When you drive a car, sometimes you go into altered state, you're hypnotized. So you just got to be careful what music you're listening to when you're driving your car. If it's really negative or whatever news station you listen to, and it puts you in an altered state, you're going to start taking that on. It's going to start becoming your identity or how you act or show up. So again, you want to be careful with some of those. So integration, guys, identify where you most often lose your state. Where does that happen? What does it look like? You can name that loop that shows up, choose one physical interruption or pattern interruption that's going to help you. Choose one identity-based action. How am I going to show up next time? What's the lesson? Why is the emotional response? So you got to do some self work. And again, if you ever want to do this through a coaching call, we can. So state control is not suppression. It's actually more control because the person who controls the state has the ultimate control. State control is a leadership aspect, and it's going to allow you to maneuver situations and stay on track a lot faster. The regulated man is consistent under pressure, and probably is going to perform a lot better. This is how you become unshakable when things don't go your way. But you also have to do some work in identifying the loops and being self-aware of your state and your response to situations. Sometimes, I see this quite often as people get into the routine of the day and there's no reflection. That's just, here's what I do, the same thing over and over. Now, some formats that's really good, but in some formats it's not because if you haven't taken the time of self-reflection, do the work on yourself. Where are you going? What does it look like? How's your environment? Is it serving? What have you not considered that if you consider it's going to move you forward faster or get you out of the environment that's not serving you? So spend some time, work on this, guys. Hopefully this helps. It's challenging you from a perspective of maybe you haven't been challenged before. So let me know if you have questions, you want to book a call. We'll jump on it. We'll do some work. So have a great evening. I'll talk with you soon.